The mountaintop is not crowded. Few climb that far. The air thins, the noise of men falls away, and only the wind and the heavens remain. It is here, in the silence above the world, that the soul is laid bare. No marketplace noise, no clamor of voices, no applause to feed the pride, only God and the man who dares to stand before him. The prophets knew this height. Moses ascended Sinai, and the mountain shook with fire. Elijah stood on Carmel, and silence fell heavier than the storm. The Son of Man prayed through the night upon the Mount of Olives, while his disciples slept. The mountain is where silence burns away distraction, and only covenant remains. Be still, and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. Psalm chapter 46, verse 10. This is no gentle invitation. It is a command. Stillness is not passivity. It is discipline. It is the warrior's stance before the Almighty, the silence that terrifies hell because it cannot be shaken. And so the gauntlet is thrown. If the Lord called you to stand today, stripped of all comfort, would you stand or break? The man who cannot endure the mountain's silence cannot endure the valley's battle. For silence is the proving ground where pride dies, where fear is exposed, where faith is tested. Noise is easy. Anyone can roar. But to be silent before God, to wait unmoved until his command resounds, that is strength. The Templars bore this truth like steel. They kept vigil in prayer before battle, kneeling in silence where no eye saw. They learned that the victory begins not with a charge, but with stillness, not with fury, but with obedience. The enemy fears such men, for they cannot be provoked, cannot be bribed, cannot be broken. Stay upon the mountain. Let silence strip you of excuses. Let it weigh upon you until only obedience remains. For in the stillness the Lord trains his warriors, not in the noise of the crowd, but in the silence of the heights. So stand. Do not descend too soon. Do not flee the silence. Grip it as you would a sword. For in that stillness your spirit is tempered, and in that stillness you are prepared for every storm below. The mountain descends into valleys, and the valleys into cities. There the noise rises again, the voices of men, the clamor of trade, the shouts of pride. But the man who has mastered silence on the height carries it with him into the crowd. He is not shaken by noise, for he has already learned to stand still before God. Discipline is the fortress of the soul. It is not built in the heat of battle, but in the quiet hours when no one sees. The city that cannot rule itself will collapse under its own weight. So too, the man who cannot govern his spirit will fall before he ever meets the enemy. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. The undisciplined man is conquered long before the trumpet sounds. Anger storms his gates. Fear takes his towers. Lust creeps through the cracks, and envy kindles fires within. He blames his enemies, but the truth is sharper. He was his own ruin. But the silent warrior holds his ground. He does not rush to speak every thought, nor pour out every feeling. He weighs them before the throne. He lets silence rule first, and then obedience decides. This is the mastery hell cannot imitate. Here the march halts. The silence thickens, not as rest, but as judgment. What sin, what chain, still holds your sword arm from striking? Do not look to another. Do not cast your blame outward. Look within. What is hidden there? What word burns on your tongue that must be silenced? What craving rules your steps that must be crucified? Better to face it now in silence than to be unmasked when the gates fall. For silence is not emptiness. It is the furnace where truth is revealed. Every chain you drag to the altar can be broken. Every wall you rebuild in discipline becomes a shield. The watchman on the tower does not sleep because the enemy prowls always. So too must you keep watch over your heart. Your emotions are soldiers. They must be ruled, or they will betray you. Your pride is a traitor. It must be bound, or it will open the gates. Silence is the commander. It waits, it watches, it does not yield. The Templars kept this vigil. Their strength was not fury, but restraint. Their silence before God made their roar on the battlefield terrible, for it was born of obedience, not impulse. So hold your ground. Guard your spirit as you would a fortress. Let silence become your shield, obedience your wall, and prayer your watchtower. For the city ruled by God cannot be broken. The silence of the mountain is not the end. It leads to a darker garden where shadows press heavier than armies, and the weight is not of swords, but of surrender. This is Gethsemane, the olive press, where every man is crushed until only obedience or rebellion remains. Silence here is not rest. It is the cost of covenant. It is not the silence of peace, but of pressure. The silence where even friends sleep, and the soul is left alone before God. And it is here that the true measure of discipline is revealed. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross daily, and follow me. Luke, chapter 9, verse 23. The cross is heavier than the sword. The sword cuts once and is lifted again. But the cross weighs down every breath, every step, every day. And yet it is the cross that makes a man unbreakable. You cannot master silence if you flee the cross. The silence that terrifies hell is not the empty vow of words, but the wordless death of self. Every desire that whispers, every hunger that claws, every pride that demands a throne, all must be brought into silence before the will of God. Here, in this garden, the command is not shouted, but whispered. Not my will, but thine. The strongest men in history were not those who conquered empires, but those who conquered themselves in this silence. And now I put the edge of the blade to you. When the garden is silent, when the hour of testing comes, when the cup is pressed to your lips, will you drink it, or will you run with the faithless into the shadows? Do not think silence means weakness. It is the refusal to yield to the chaos within. It is the warrior's stillness before the strike, the calm before the trumpet sounds, the surrender that becomes strength. Hell trembles not at a man's noise, but at his obedience. The Templar understood this. Their silence in the night was not emptiness, but preparation. They bent the knee unseen, so they could rise unshaken in the day of battle. Their power did not come from fury, but from the vow kept in silence when no one was watching. So too must you carry your cross daily. Not once, not in a moment of passion, but every dawn and every dusk. For only he who dies daily will rise eternal. Only he who embraces silence at the cost of his will can roar with truth when the trumpet calls. The climb has led to the summit. Every silence in the wilderness, every silence on the mountain, every silence in the garden has brought you here. The summit is not ease. It is fire at the edge of heaven, the final trial before the gates. And here, in this high silence, the enemy makes his last charge. He roars, but the roar is hollow. He drags the chains he could not fasten to you. He summons the shadows that no longer own you. For he knows what silence you have learned, and it terrifies him. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth saving he that receiveth it revelation. Chapter 2, verse 17. This is the promise sealed in silence, not the applause of crowds, but the secret reward of the faithful. Not the crown shouted from men, but the stone whispered from God's own hand, a name no enemy can steal, a vow no darkness can erase. And now, the last strike must be given. When the trumpet sounds and the gates are closed, will your name be found among the faithful or the fallen? This is not a question you answer with lips. It is carved by the scars you carry, the battles you fought in secret, the vows you kept when no one was watching. Your silence will testify louder than your words. Your obedience will echo when every noise has died. Hell does not fear the man who shouts his faith. It fears the man whose silence is covenant, the man whose stillness is discipline, whose restraint is command, whose obedience is unyielding. That man cannot be moved. That man is already sealed. So stand. Stand in silence that is not weakness, but war. Stand in silence that is not retreat, but readiness. Stand in silence that is not emptiness, but the fullness of God's command. Lift your head, watchman. The night is almost past. The dawn of Zion burns at the horizon. The gates will open, and the faithful will march in white. Let your silence be found stronger than any roar. Let your obedience be found brighter than any crown. Let your name be found written where no shadow can erase it. And when the heavens shake, when the host descends, when the King rides in fire and glory, let it be that you were among the few who mastered the silence, bore the cross, and endured unto the end.